Well, the offseason is almost over as we're less than a week away from pitchers and catchers reporting. Did the Atlanta Braves do enough this offseason? We'll discuss that and look at the projections, see what they think about the Atlanta Braves going into 2025. All that on today's episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastroianni. You can follow me on social media at ShortstopBall. Check out the podcast there at LockedOn_Braves. Check us out on Instagram at Locked On Braves. Send me in a question there, as I'm trying to answer one daily over there on Instagram, but I need some more questions submitted. So shoot me a message on Instagram. Once I learn how to use the app and find it, I will answer it there as well. So make sure you give us a follow there and send me in a question on Instagram, Locked On Braves. If you're new and watching this on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, hit the thumbs up button, leave me a comment down below. And if you're listening on the audio version, you can help out by leaving me a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever it is that you get your podcast. And thank you so much for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. On today's episode, we are going to be taking a look at the offseason. It's not over yet, but it's almost time for spring training. Have the Atlanta Braves done enough? And we're going to take a look at some of the projection systems out there to see what they think about the Atlanta Braves. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. So what I wanted to get into on today's podcast really is, if this is it, if there are no more major moves coming, have the Braves done enough this offseason? And also want to look at some of the projections. PECOTA projections are out. FanGraphs have had their projections out for a little bit, to see what those outside of Braves country think. Because it's easy for us to get in our bubble, and we are sitting here frustrated with a slow offseason and to think that this team just isn't that good, when that's really not the case. So we're going to look at what some of the outsiders think about the Atlanta Braves. But next week, players will be arriving in Northport, Florida to get ready and start preparing for the 2025 season. We have almost made it. It is a long off season, or at least it feels very long, but we're in the month of February now. Things are really about to start ramping up with players arriving for spring training next week. Games will be here before you know it. We'll have actual game coverage to talk about in just a little over 2 weeks with the Braves' first spring training game, and then less than 50 days from the season officially kicking off, the Braves playing in the Padres out on the West Coast. So again, things are about to start really ramping up here, and the offseason is almost over. And as of now, the Braves have only made one big move this offseason, or at least one big addition. They did trade Jorge Soler on the first day of the offseason, but only one big addition so far, and that was the addition of Jurickson Profar, which is a pretty sizable move for the Atlanta Braves, and definitely took care of a need that they had in the outfield. But they also had needs in the back of the rotation, and they also have needs in the bullpen as well after the injury to Joe Jimenez. Look, if Joe Jimenez gets injured, and maybe there's a chance he's back at the end of 2025, I'm not banking on that. But if he doesn't get injured and you don't make a major move for the bullpen, I think that's okay. But once he was injured and you knew he was going to miss significant time this season, at that point, finding some not just bullpen depth, but quality bullpen depth, somebody that could step into a setup role if needed, I think should have become a pretty big priority for the Atlanta Braves. Now, I do have to, give the qualifying statement that the offseason is not over and that there are some options out there. But to only address one of those needs, when I've said all offseason, again, especially with the loss of Joe Jimenez, I think pitching depth is the biggest need of this team. Like, I'm glad they got Profar, and it definitely helps with the depth there. But I think I would be more okay going into a season with Kelenic and left and Brian De La Cruz and right for a little while until Acuna comes back than I am going into the season with Grant Holmes and Ian Anderson as your fourth and fifth starter, or whoever they're going to have, Pierce Johnson, Aaron Bummer as your top setup guys for Raisel Iglesias. I'm not as comfortable with not having the pitching shored up this offseason and those needs taken care of. Again, I love all of them. I would love to see all of those holes filled, and not getting them filled, I think, will be a negative offseason for the Atlanta Braves. Not addressing those needs that you have. And look, like I said, there's still time left, and there are some names out there. I still would be shocked at this point if the Alex Anthopoulos, who has made it a huge priority every offseason since 2019, where he had to scramble at the deadline to fix his bullpen, he has made it a huge priority to really shore up the bullpen and have plenty of arms going into a season. And to the fact where he went and spent a lot of money on Kenley Jansen, not too far before opening day and before the season began. So that has been a big priority for him in just about every offseason since 2019. So I would be pretty shocked if he doesn't bring in somebody that can be a high leverage reliever before the season begins. David Robertson is still out there. He's been at the top of my list for a while. I know he's 40, but he just continues to get it done. And I just think he makes a lot of sense. Kenley Jansen's out there. Craig Kimbrell, I've talked about it. I don't really want to go back to those guys, but they do have, high leverage type of experience and could fill those roles. Kyle Finnegan is another one out there that I think could be a pretty popular arm. So there are some options out there. It's getting very limited this time of the offseason. And on the starting pitching side of things, while I do understand what AA is saying and that I don't want to bring anybody in unless they are better than a Grant Holmes and an Ian Anderson, I get that. Why block those guys who are out of options, bringing in guys who might be just as good or just as bad, depending on your view of those guys? I get that. Why spend another $10 million, or in the case of, like a Charlie Morton and Justin Verlander or a Max Scherzer, all those guys are getting $15 million for 1 year. Instead of doing that for guys who, might be just as good as a Grant Holmes or an Ian Anderson, why spend that money when you already have those guys who are out of options? Here is my issue with that. I still like the idea of having more depth in the rotation. While I am very optimistic that Spencer Strider is going to be back within the first 2 weeks of the season, I really don't think we'll know, obviously, when we get into spring training. I don't think he's going to be out that long. And the people that are really concerned about Acuna, I know reports out there that maybe he's not back until the beginning of May, which I think would actually be a good report based on some people out there have been thinking he might not come back till June. I don't know what they're going to look like this year in Acuna and Strider, but I do feel like they are both progressing very well and could be ready on opening day if needed. There's just no reason for the Braves to push either one of them. So the people who are concerned that they're not going to be there on opening day and are panicking a little bit about that, I would not read too much into that. Again, I think Strider, assuming all goes well in spring training, will be ready the first 2 weeks of the regular season or first 2 weeks of April. Acuna, assuming everything goes well there, I think he'll be ready, by the beginning of May. And again, I think both of those guys could be ready for opening day. There's just no reason to push them. So looking at it from Alex's point of view, why go spend $10 to $15 million on a guy that might not be any better than Grant Holmes or Ian Anderson when you are feeling pretty confident that you're going to get Spencer Strider back in the first 2 months, or the first 2 weeks rather, of the regular season? I get that. But just go to a 6-man rotation. Why not just have that extra depth when you're going to need a lot of arms to get through the season? Why not just build in that extra depth when you're going to need to, baby is not the right word, but you're going to need to, hold back some of these arms to keep them fresh throughout the season. Why not go sign a Jose Quintana? Why not go sign a Lance Lynn? Why not go sign a Kyle Gibson? I am not looking for top of the rotation. I'm looking for innings. And those guys can give you innings and can give you some quality innings. Why not go get one of those guys, assuming the price is right? If you can get any of those guys for under $10 million, that deal needs to be done today. And look, they may not be any better than a Grant Holmes or an Ian Anderson, but you need those arms to get through a season, and you need that depth that you can trust. Look, I don't know that we can trust Grant Holmes. I don't know that you can trust Ian Anderson. I don't know that I can trust Bryce Elder, AJ Smith-Shawver, Hurston Waldrop, Lucas Braun, Drew Hackenberg. There's a lot of depth there. I don't know if I can trust them. I know Jose Quintana can go out there and give me 5 quality innings. I know Kyle Gibson can go out there and give me 5 quality innings. I'm not as sure about that on Lance Lynn, but I think that he can potentially. Why not go get one of those guys to help give you some more depth? So I get the reasoning for Alex saying that. I just don't agree with it. Now, here's the other part of that. And I think it's become pretty clear that they want to stay under the tax, because otherwise, why not spend $15 million on Charlie Morton and get that security back in your rotation? Look, I'd have to imagine Charlie really wanted to come back to Atlanta. And some of his comments afterward, he was kind of perplexed about what's going on in Atlanta. It seems very obvious that they want to stay under the tax, which I don't agree with either. But that's the only reason that I can think of why you wouldn't go out and give yourself more depth to help get you through the season. Right now, you look at roster resource on FanGraphs, they have the Braves about $11 million away from the luxury tax threshold. And Alex likes to keep a little buffer for in-season movement. So I am of the belief now that, one, they're going to stay under the tax. That's always what they were going to do unless an amazing deal just fell in their lap. If an amazing deal fell in their lap and they could get, let's just say that Max Fried really wanted to come back and he was willing to come back on a 5-year deal for, 26, 27 million. I think the Braves would have done that, or any type of other pitcher like that they could have got a huge team-friendly deal on. I think the Braves would have done it. It just wasn't going to happen. So anything short of that, I just don't think the Braves are going to go over that tax if they don't have to. And I don't think they're going to go over the tax this year for a Quintana or any type of middling reliever out there. Again, I don't agree with that. It just seems obvious that's what is happening here. Now, I don't think you're setting yourself up as best you can to go into a season, and that stinks as a fan, because getting another setup reliever, getting another depth piece for the rotation, I'd feel much better about this team going into the year. However, I have maintained since the beginning of the offseason that this team could do nothing this offseason and still be one of the favorites going into 2025. And they've basically done nothing this offseason, and the latest projections that you have out right now have the Braves viewed as one of the favorites, heavy favorites, going into 2025. We'll look at those projections here next. The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to make it even more exciting than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports, with over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded. PrizePicks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. Here's how it works. You pick more or less on at least 2 players' projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. PrizePicks even has a free pick for the big game where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw 1 yard to win. I could do that. Pair it with one of more correct picks and you're cashing out. I've watched fewer than 5 NFL games this year, so don't put much stock into what I'm about to say. But I've seen the Saquon Barkley highlight probably 1 million times, so I'm picking him to score a touchdown in this game. You can go to PrizePicks as well to get in on the action. PrizePicks offers fast, safe withdrawals. When you win, cash in your account. It's as little as 15 minutes. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Also, make sure you check out some of the tools PrizePicks offers to make sure you're practicing responsible play. PrizePicks, run your game. Thanks as always for making Locked On Braves your first listen of the day. Go check out Locked On MLB with your second listen, solely getting you caught up with everything happening around Major League Baseball and getting you set up for the upcoming season and spring training. Like I said, right around the corner. We'll have our mailbag episode tomorrow afternoon. Usually I do that on Friday. Look for my post from X, _Braves on X on Friday morning. Submit your question to that post to be answered on Friday's mailbag episode. And again, if you're on Instagram, please go out there, follow us, shoot me a message there with a question that you have, and I'll answer it right there on Instagram. All right, next I want to look at the projections for the upcoming season. Now, to be fair, projections are not always accurate. Stating the obvious there, projections were notoriously low on the Atlanta Braves as they started this run. Often, especially in those early years for the Atlanta Braves, they were always picking them to finish, second, third in the division after the Mets and Phillies were spending a lot of money, and the Braves kept outperforming those projections. So projections are what they are, but they do generally give you a good idea of who the best teams are entering the season. If everybody stays healthy, if everything goes the way that it should, these are the teams that should be the best teams in baseball. Last year, PECOTA had the Braves projected to win 100 games. They fell 11 games short of that, but PECOTA couldn't predict that the Braves lineup was just going to be absolutely ravaged with injuries. You can't predict injuries. They also projected the Dodgers winning the most games and being the best team in baseball. So they got that right. They also predicted 4 of the 6 NL playoff teams correctly. So that's pretty good. The D-backs were one of the teams they had in that missed, and they obviously missed out because of a tiebreaker. In the National League, or in the American League, they only got 3 of 6 AL teams right. But that's more of a wide open league over there. It's not as top heavy as it is in the National League. So let's look at the PECOTA projections for the upcoming season. What PECOTA does, in case you're not familiar with PECOTA, is they simulate the season over and over again to project what might happen using the information that we have to find the most likely outcome. But this is baseball, and it can be unpredictable. But here is what PECOTA has projected right now. They have the Braves to win the NL East with 92.4 wins. That is the second most wins projected behind the Dodgers of any team. They have the Mets projected at 90.7 wins and the Phillies at 87.2. And I believe this was updated after the Pete Alonso signing as well. So they got the Mets still behind the Braves with 90.7 wins. In the NL Central, they have the Cubs there at 90.2 wins, winning the division ahead of the Brewers at just 80.1 wins. So they really liked what the Cubs did this offseason. I talked about it a lot. The Cubs have certainly made some moves like they're going for it this year. With some of the moves that they've made, we'll see if it pays off for them. Certainly they're in a division that is very winnable, and you get the postseason, get hot at the right time. Who knows? But they got the Cubs as heavy favorites in the NL Central. In the NL West, obviously the Dodgers are big favorites. They have them projected to win 104 games. I don't think I've ever seen a projection that high. They have the Diamondbacks at 87 wins and the Padres at 82.5. So they're National League playoff teams right now are the Braves, Cubs, and Dodgers as division winners, with the Mets, Phillies, and Diamondbacks as wild card teams. It is a tough division in the NL East. It figures to be one of the most competitive, again, along with the AL East. So it's going to be, tough for all of those teams. Now, you don't have to play each other as much anymore, and that certainly helps, but certainly would rather be in one of the central divisions if I'm the Braves. In the AL East, the Orioles are projected to win the division with 89 games, but the Yankees are right behind them at 88.9, so they're both basically deadlocked. The Blue Jays at 85.1, the Rays at 82.3, and the Red Sox at 78. In the AL Central, the Twins are projected to win the division at 85.7 wins, the Royals at 81.6, and the Guardians at 80.6 wins. And the Tigers at 79.4. So they're not buying into the Tigers this year, although I think they're doing some good things as well. Just got Jack Flaherty. They're in on the Alex Bregman talks as well. So we'll see what happens there. In the AL West, the Rangers are projected to win the division with 89.3 wins. So like the Rangers to have a bounce back season, and the Astros falling down a little bit at 86.8 and the Mariners at 86.1. So they have 3 AL West teams getting into the postseason with the Rangers, Astros, and Mariners, and then the Twins in the AL Central, and then the Orioles and Yankees from the AL East. So those are your PECOTA projections, and those will change leading up to the season. So some things could certainly change there. If Bregman signs with the Tigers, I imagine that'd give them a bump, or if he goes back to the Astros, maybe that gives them a little bit of bump in the AL West. So these still could fluctuate. If somebody gets injured, they'll reflect that. So if you want to check that out, you can just go search PECOTA projections, Major League Baseball projections, and see those. Again, they'll fluctuate. But PECOTA clearly likes the Braves, as they have them with the second most wins, even though that's still more than 10 fewer wins than the Dodgers. I think if you're a Braves fan, what kind of worries you about this projection a little bit is that it seems like the Dodgers are in their own tier, which isn't a surprise. The Dodgers are certainly in a tier by themselves ahead of everyone else. I think for me, I was hoping to look at these projections and see, okay, the Dodgers are in a tier by themselves, then there's a gap, and then it's the Braves in another tier by themselves, and then a gap, and then you have your Mets, Phillies, Yankees, Orioles. Because I still feel like the Braves are a good bit better than those other teams. I think they're closer to the Dodgers than anyone. Maybe that's a little bit of bias in here, but the Braves, at least from the PECOTA projections, I'm going to get into FanGraphs projections in a moment. From the PECOTA projections, they have the Braves more in a tier of 6 teams between 89 to 92 wins. and you're in one of the most competitive divisions in baseball. It's just, if the injury bug were to hit again, there's not a lot of wiggle room because you're going to have to face the Mets and the Phillies. Like I said, you don't have to play them as much, but it's still very stiff competition, and you could very easily fall behind, and then you're trying to claw your way into a wild card spot just like they were last year. So that worries me a little bit because I would have liked to see the Braves maybe at 94 wins even, to kind of give them a little bit of that separation between that tier that they're in based on PECOTA. But looking at FanGraphs, they're a little more favorable to the Braves, and they do kind of put them in their own tier between the Dodgers and everyone else. They have the Dodgers at the top with 97 wins, and then they have the Braves with the second most at 93. But then they have a group of teams between 85 and 87 wins. And the Yankees, the Phillies, the Mets, the Diamondbacks, and the Rangers. So they do put a little bit of a more distance between the Braves and the rest of the teams. And obviously there's still a big gap between the Dodgers and the Braves. Now, if you look at projected F4, so FanGraphs WAR per team, the FanGraphs has the Dodgers at the top at a projected 55.9 F4. Then they have the Braves at 51.6. The only two teams projected to have over 50 WAR this year. And then you got the Yankees at 49.5, followed by the Mets and the Phillies behind them. I think those are the top 5 teams in baseball. Unfortunate that, 4 of them are in the National League. National League is very tough. As I said earlier, it's very top heavy. A lot of really good teams in the National League. It's more wide open in the American League. The Yankees are at the top, but PECOTA projections had the Orioles just slightly ahead of them. I think it's more wide open in the American League. Again, to me, there's an obvious outlier in the Dodgers, but I think the Braves are somewhere in the middle between the Dodgers and that group of Yankees, Orioles, Phillies, and Mets. I still think on paper they're a little bit of a distance ahead of them, but I think those are your top contenders for 2025. And you go over and look at FanDuel odds. FanDuel has the Dodgers with the best odds to win the World Series at plus 250. Again, no surprise there. Then they have the Yankees at plus 750, and then they have the Braves at plus 900. Now, I think you see the Yankees inflated a little bit. One, they're in their American League, which, like I said, is a little bit more wide open. So it's maybe a little bit easier path for the Yankees to get there. They don't have as much stiff competition like the Braves and Phillies and Mets do. So that's probably why they're elevated a little bit more. And they're just the Yankees. They're a popular team, worldwide. They're going to get more attention. But then you have the Braves at plus 900, the Phillies and Mets at plus 1100, and the Orioles at plus 1400. And then there's a big gap between them and the Astros at plus 2100. So for me, going into the season, I think there are 5 to 6 pretty clear top teams in baseball, and the Dodgers, the Braves, the Yankees, the Phillies, and the Mets. And I put the Orioles in there as well. So 6 teams that I think are pretty highly favored going into the year, and the Braves are one of them. And we'll do player projections later when I break down position groups in spring training, but the Braves are projected to have the top 5 F4 at 4 different positions and at starting pitcher. Somehow that doesn't include DH. They have the Braves projected to have the 7th highest F4 despite having Marcell Ozuna the past 2 years. And they also have the Braves bullpen in the top 10. So again, projections are very favorable to the Braves, especially on FanGraphs. Look, I'm not happy that they didn't do more this offseason, and the offseason isn't over yet. And I'm not happy the fact that they're not wanting to go over this luxury tax unless just a great deal falls in their lap, because I don't know how much of, like I said this in a podcast a couple of weeks ago, if they want to get under the tax, even if the what they're going to gain in that is negligible, if they want to do that because they're going to go crazy spending wise for the next 3 or 4 years, then by all means get under the tax. Go out and sign Dylan Cease next offseason, or Michael King, or Bo Bichette, or whoever. Go make some big moves in the offseason. I just have a hard time believing that's what they're going to do. But again, even if you're upset with this offseason and you're like me and you're not satisfied, you don't think they did enough, don't let that blind you from the fact that this is still one of the top 5 teams in baseball going into the year. And that's not just me saying that. That is coming from outside of Braves country. That is national media across the landscape. These are odds makers. These are projection systems who have no bias. You're just entering in numbers based on evidence, based on past history. These computers have no bias, and yet they have determined that the Braves are one of the favorites going into this season. So again, I know we are all disappointed to this point with what has happened this offseason with the Braves, but at least on paper and based on past history, when these guys are healthy, and look, health is something that all teams are worried about. I know we're coming off a year where the Braves were just absolutely devastated in the lineup, and the year before that where you were devastated in the rotation, and even last year you lost Spencer Strider within the first 2 weeks of the season. So we're coming off a year where we were just decimated by injuries, and that's what's on everybody's mind. But that is the big issue with everybody. Look at the Dodgers. They have the best team on paper, maybe one of the best teams on paper we've seen. But that rotation could fall apart in an instant. Mookie Betts is getting older. Freddie Freeman is getting older. I mean, they could be a couple of injuries away as well to coming back down to earth. So injuries are something that every team is going to worry about. But at least on paper, the Braves have as much talent as anybody else not named the Dodgers going into 2025. And they are going to be one of the favorites to get to the postseason. And once you get there, we'll just see what happens. But this Braves team is very good. But again, I would love to see them still go out and get some more arms. All right, next we'll talk about some people who did get arms, including the Braves, who made another couple of minor league deals for some arms. We'll get into that news here next. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or a comedy, and now Gametime has made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Gametime Picks. This feature filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Recently, I was looking for tickets for an upcoming basketball game in my area using the Gametime app. And with Gametime Picks, I found amazing deals and could even see the view from my seat before buying. The super deal was particularly impressive, offering great seats at unbeatable prices. Plus, the app's all-in pricing that you can filter right there in the app on the same screen shows the total cost up front. You get no surprises at the checkout. I cannot stand that about other ticketing apps, which I don't use anymore, partly and because of that, because I can filter that all, and they make it easy. It's right there at the top of the screen. All you do, filter all-in prices, and you are going to see what you're paying. There's no surprises at checkout. Let's take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Let's wrap up talking about the latest news from around Major League Baseball. The biggest news of the past couple of days is Pete Alonso signing a 2-year, $54 million deal with the Mets. He'll make $30 million in 2025 with an opt-out after the season, going the way of many other Scott Boras clients the past couple of off seasons, signing a short-term deal with an opt-out, hoping to hit the market again and make some big money. That's what Pete Alonso will be doing after he didn't find that big long-term deal this offseason. We'll see if that works out for him. But you look at the Mets lineup now: Lindor, Soto, Alonso, Nimmo, Vientos, Winker. I really don't know what they're going to look like in center field. You got Siri, Taylor, Marte, McNeil, Alvarez. Look, this isn't a Braves fan trying to rain on the Mets parade here. The top three in that order is really solid. Lindor, Soto, Alonso. It's a really solid, top of the lineup. If Vientos, is the real deal power hitter that he showed last year, okay, maybe you got a solid four-hole hitter there. If Alvarez can, bounce back, he's got some big power, be a nice middle of the order bat. Nimmo, obviously a guy who can get on base. We know what he does. I look at the bottom of that lineup. I look at Winker. I look at, whoever they're going to have in center. I look at Jeff McNeil. I mean, these guys are okay. I feel like there's still a good bit of holes in that lineup that you can get around. So again, I love the top. Lindor, Soto, that's going to be one of the best, 1-2 punches, just like, it was for Soto and Aaron Judge. So Lindor, Soto, Alonso, like I said, Vientos can kind of take a step forward there this year as well. Could be a really, really good lineup. I think it will be a good lineup. I don't look at that and it doesn't scream, whoa, they're going to compete with the Dodgers and Braves and others offensively. I think it'll be a good offense, but I don't know if it'll be a great offense. We'll see. But even putting Alonso in there, doesn't make a big difference for me, although they got a lot of power now. Certainly can say that. Again, Alvarez, Vientos, Alonso, Soto. I mean, you're talking about all guys who can hit, 30 home runs. I don't know if Alvarez will get there depending on how much playing time he gets as the catcher. Lindor too. I mean, they could possibly have 3 or 4 guys that hit 30 home runs for you this upcoming year. So there's certainly a lot of power in that lineup. The Braves signed Chad Kuhl to a minor league deal, 5.06 ERA with the White Sox last year, over 53 and a third innings with 54 strikeouts, a 152 whip. Slider sinker guy, mostly threw 6 pitches last year as a reliever. He was formerly a starter. I wonder, there's 2 things either happening here with the Braves in this Chad Kuhl signing. Either they see something in the slider, which is a pretty solid pitch for him, and they want him to primarily focus on that and maybe one other pitch and see if he can really become a solid reliever, or if they just like him because he can be that flex guy that can come out of the bullpen for you or start a game for you if needed. I'm hoping it's the first thing that I said, that they see something in that pitch mix that they could, tone it down a little bit, maybe focus on 2 or 3 pitches and turn him into a really good reliever. Braves also signed right-handed pitcher Danny Jimenez to a minor league deal, has an XBA of 205 or lower in 3 straight seasons. That's really, really good, but he doesn't strike out a ton and he walks a ton, which is not good. Last year, he got bit by the home runs a little bit, with a home run per 9 going from 1.16 to 2.10, and that led to an inflated ERA. He's 31. I'm not sure the Braves are suddenly going to teach him how to throw strikes, but doesn't give up a lot of hits. It's just, can he limit the walks and limit the long balls? And he could be a decent reliever, but he also could be a guy we just never hear from again. Ramon Laureano gets $4 million from the Orioles. Tim Hill gets $2.5 million from the Yankees. And Danny Coulombe gets $3 million from the Twins. I always feel like I'm saying that right, like I'm in Wakanda or something when I'm trying to say his last name. Randall Grichuk signed a 1-year deal with a mutual option that guaranteed. This is the one that maybe hurts me. I mean, Randall Grichuk is a really good hitter coming off a really good year, and he got 1 year, $5 million guaranteed to go back to the Diamondbacks. I'd love to see the Rays make that deal. Tommy Pham gets 1 year, $4 million with the Pirates. Ben Gamel 1 year, $1.2 million with the Astros. Harrison Bader got $6.25 million with the Twins. Yoan Moncada 1 year, $5 million with the Angels. Cubs traded for Ryan Brazier after he was DFA'd by the Dodgers. Yankees DFA'd Alan Winans, so the Braves want to go try to snatch him back up. And the Yankees claimed Braden Shoemake. So a couple of former Braves there, one getting DFA'd, one getting snatched back up. A couple of questions from those here live. Joseph Greenwell, what's up, Jake? So ready for spring training and opening day. Me too. Can't wait for that. John Anderson, even if Holmes and Anderson pitch well, how many innings realistically can they cover over the course of a season, given one has been a reliever primarily of late and one is coming back from injury? That's a great point. Look, not only, I get it. If Strider comes back, he's a possible Max Fried replacement, but you got to replace a lot of innings for Charlie Morton. And how confident are you that Grant Holmes and Ian Anderson can do that? I'm not all that confident in that at the moment. Maybe they can, but that's a great point. How many innings are they realistically going to be able to give you? 120, 130, 140, if everything goes well and they stay in the rotation all year. Chris Hester, hey, Jake. I'm glad you're here tonight. Thank you so much for joining me there, Chris. I all of a sudden lost your comment. We are in great shape for a postseason run. We could always use some more pitching, though. Yeah, I mean, you can never have enough pitching, which is why I'd really love to see them go out and sign one or two more arms. Gary Clemens in here, SoCal Brave, John Anderson, Matt Karcher, Jeffrey Humphreys, Doug Disciple, Sethan. Thank you all for joining me live on today's episode of Locked On Braves. Make sure you come back tomorrow for our mailbag episode. Submit your questions to be answered there from @LockedOn_Braves on X. Look for that post. Submit your question to be answered on our Friday mailbag podcast. Subscribe on YouTube if you're new. Hit that thumbs up button. Leave me a comment down below. Go follow me on Instagram. Ask me a question over there. I'll answer it right there in Instagram. Still learning how to use it, but I will try my best. Make sure you go follow us on social media @shortstopball, @LockedOn_Braves. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.